It's basically the Mark 6 has been going into limp mode, and so probably bring up the warning now. So that's the fault that comes up. The problem is caused by the failure of the turbo actuator, and this can be confirmed by pulling off the engine cover. You can remove this oil return from the cam cover. So that just comes off by squeezing the wider part and then pulling away, and it just clips off real easy. So that's the turbocharger down there, and that there is the vacuum hose. So there's a couple of ways to test this. So if you apply a vacuum to this hose here, or pull it off, and then use a hose or a vacuum tool to apply vacuum to that nipple there, it should cause the control arm for the turbocharger, which is difficult to get on film. So this is just to demonstrate what I was trying to test on the car. So this is the control arm here, and these two nuts will hold a lever in between them, so they can be adjusted. There's a way to adjust it. There's also a cheat, so I know the proper method of doing it, but I'm gonna try the cheat method in case you don't have the proper equipment to do it. And all you have to do is provide a vacuum on this, and then the control arms will move. Okay, so in order to remove the turbo actuator, you need to remove a couple parts first. So you need to remove the camshaft breathe hose, which I've done already, and then you need to remove the air box and the hot air inlet from the turbo, so that's the lower part there. They also recommend removing the oil feed hose, and you require a couple of special spanners is what they say, but I don't have those. With these connectors, you always want to push them on first, then release the little lever and then pull it off. If you try to pull on it and then push the release, it won't come off and you'll just break the connector. You need to remove this clip. Someone had already done it on this car. I've been in here before. I had to service it, change the air filter. You can unclip this from there, or you can just turn it out around that pipe. Okay, now when you remove this part, you just got to remove that clip there, or just loosen it. You don't have to remove it, just loosen it, and then pull it off, and the VW safety cap the end of the turbo. Let's loosen off this clip. It's a 7mm socket. It's probably best. This is quite tight to get a screwdriver in there, and then also fiddly, so a little ratchet in a 7mm. Pull these hoses off. So don't damage anything. Should be able to turn this guy off. I'm going to be gentle, just because this is a plastic mount on the face. Don't want to break that. It's probably quite brittle. Being in a high temperature environment, hot and cold, fatigues and plastic, bleeds the oils out of it, so it turns quite brittle and cracks it. Just removing the top part of the actuator now, and I've loosened up the 3 bolts there. The primary reason why they want you to remove this oil feed hose is to give these clearance to come out, but then also so you can get the spanner on it more easily. My personal opinion is that it's probably easier to leave the oil feed on there and then just loosen all 3 bolts, and they're short enough so you can loosen them out around that hose. I'd rather work around it than deal with airlocks in the oil hose and having to re-bleed the system, if you like. If we have a look down here, you can see the securing clip that holds the adjustment of the control arm. So I just get a flat screwdriver in there, and then I should be able to just turn it and pop it off. Now that's dropped down, and you've heard it land on the under tray. This is the part of the job that requires your specialist spanner. I don't have the genuine VW tool, although I can list the part number for you. But I don't have that, and I don't intend to buy it because I'm not doing this every day. Well, I've got one of these floppy neck ratchet spanners, which snap on, and most people produce, and they're a lot easier to come by, probably a lot cheaper too. So if I fold this like this, well, again, so it means having to work around this oil feed hose again, but you can just slide the spanner flat through the gap and then turn it upright so it sits like that, get it over the little nut, and then just loosen it, and we should be able to just spin it off by hand the rest of the way. So I've been able to just slide a ratchet spanner in here. Got a little 10mm that's just thin enough for it to avoid taking off that oil feed. Otherwise, VW does say to release this securing bolt just here that holds it to the engine head. If you release that, then it should give you a little bit more flexibility, but you want to be careful that you don't go and kink the pipe or damage it. It's very important that you don't damage it, because your turbo will break if it doesn't have the correct oil pressure. So once you've removed the actuator itself, you can see, right, this is the new one that I've bought. I think this is a genuine one, and you can tell by the size of these nuts that are on there. They're a lot thicker, and this actually made it really difficult to get this one off because it has these skinny little nuts, so it's really difficult to get the spanner over them. And what I ended up having to do is get a screwdriver and push the lever down so that I could get the ratchet spanner on it enough to loosen it, because with these skinny nuts there's actually like I think it's actually the rod adjustment or something obstructs the ratchet from fully seating on it, whereas if you have a thicker nut, then it has, there's enough there so you can get on it and get it loose. But once you've actually loosened it, it will spin off really easy with your fingers. So the other thing to note now is you have to adjust the position of this for the actuation on the turbo. There is a genuine method of doing it, which requires diagnostics equipment. You go into measuring blocks on the engine, channel 120, and when you apply vacuum to this, it gives you a reading in voltage. The other method is to just copy the length on there. I'm going to use a vernier caliper and measure it from the top of the housing to that edge of the bolt, and then adjust this the same. And then I'm actually going to plug it in and see how accurate that is. just in case you don't have the equipment, and then I'll see, I'll be able to read the measuring blocks and see if that actually has calibrated correctly. Just to show you what this one's doing, if I apply a vacuum, you'll see it briefly moves and then it won't hold the vacuum, and then the rod slides back. So whereas on this one, if I apply a vacuum to it, it will just hold its position. When it comes to putting these bolts back in, obviously before you tighten up that rod end, you got to put these, you want to tighten the actual actuator down so that it doesn't move and mess your adjustment up. But I found it easiest to, if you don't remove the oil pipe, to put this lower one in first and then just turn it in by hand. And then the other one that's behind the pipe, and the top one you can actually get to quite freely, so that one doesn't really matter. But if you put the lower ones in first, so just to show you this, because getting in there is an absolute fiddle to put that 10mm back on. If you come around to the side of the car and get your hand in like this is also how I turned it off. Like once it's loose, you can just spin it with your fingers nice and easy. I'm just going to tighten this up to the point where it's adjusted with the vernier caliper, and then we'll go have a look and see what the measuring blocks say and how accurate that is. Okay, so I'm just going to fire up VCDS, plug it in, ignition on, turn the AC fan off, lights off, just to save the battery on the car. And then if I go to installation list, auto scan installation list, so this is the fault on the engine that I've got. Turbo boost pressure control position sensor, open circuit and plausible. So that was from and I have the mass airflow sensor off. So now that I've replaced that sensor, I can go into measuring blocks, and then it said it was 120, and so this is the voltage that it was talking about. So this is with just using a vernier caliper to measure it, and basically the genuine instructions tell you to apply a vacuum with both of the control rod ends loosened. Apply a vacuum until you have 0.76 volts constant, and then keep that vacuum so that this voltage stays the same. And then what you do is you will tighten the top rod, the top nut on the rod, which I'll just show you now. So with that constant voltage, you need to tighten this down so the control lever reaches its end stop. So with this one, it's actually been punched because it's an aftermarket one, so it's actually pre-measured. So once you've lowered this down onto the control rod, so it's pushed it to the end stop by hand, then you tighten the other one up and lock the rod in place. Then it says to release the pressure from the vacuum that you've put on there to give it a constant 0.76 volts in that measuring block. Okay, so I'm running out of space on the memory card here, but if I release the pressure, you can see it drops down to 3.572, which is bang in the middle of the range, which was 3.3 to 3.9. So I'm happy with that. Now all I've got to do is tighten it into place, and then put the locking mechanism in. Okay, so I did end up running out of space on the memory card for my camera yesterday, but I came to the conclusion that even if you didn't have the diagnostic software, you should still be able to do this job successfully if you just measure it accurately enough. You should end up within range. So even when I just kind of half-assed it, I ended up with 3.95 volts. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if it helped you out, I appreciate it if you help me out and like and subscribe to my channel. Cheers. Nice one.